There is someone in your life right now, someone you likely smiled at today, who goes home, sits in the dead quiet, and loves you in a language you will absolutely never hear. Not because they lack the courage to speak it, not because their soul is broken, but because the love is terrifyingly real enough. Real enough that they would rather violently protect you from it than risk destroying what already safely exists between you. That is not a weakness. That is one of the most agonizing, disciplined forms of love a human being can ever carry. Before we go any further, I need you to stop for just a second. Ask yourself brutally, honestly, is there someone in your life right now who loves you entirely in the dark? Someone whose warmth toward you has always felt inexplicably heavier, slightly larger than the context of your relationship ever explains. Someone who shows up just a fraction more consistently than casual friendship could ever require. If a face just flashed into your mind, hold that thought securely, because what comes next will permanently change the way you look at them. There is a particular, agonizing cruelty in wanting what you absolutely cannot have. Not the sharp, sudden cruelty of loss, but the slow, suffocating, pressurized kind that has absolutely nowhere to escape to. When heavy desire finds no physical outlet, it does not simply evaporate. The human psyche is never that merciful. Instead, it violently descends. It sinks far below the threshold of daily awareness and takes up permanent residence in the dark part of you that you never show at dinner tables or busy work meetings, the hidden part that forcefully surfaces only in the totally unguarded, breathless moments right before sleep, in the sudden visceral ache triggered by a passing song, in the terrifying way your body physically responds long before your logical mind catches up. This is exactly what it means for a massive love to live permanently in the shadow. Not that it necessarily becomes dark or dangerously destructive, but that it becomes completely hidden. Sometimes even from your own self, you helplessly go about your painfully ordinary life with an extraordinary, crushing weight tucked silently underneath it. You laugh perfectly at the right moments. You answer routine emails. You are, by every single external measure, completely fine. But beneath all of that plastic normality, something vast, wordless, and heavy is slowly turning in the dark. What makes this psychological state particularly consuming is that unexpressed desire absolutely refuses to stay still. It ravenously feeds on human imagination. In the total absence of real contact, the mind frantically manufactures it. Entire conversations that never actually happened. Flawless versions of a life that will absolutely never be lived. The person tragically becomes both more and significantly less than who they actually are. More, because your longing has decorated them with everything your desperate heart needs them to be. Less, because you never truly, authentically encounter them. You only encounter the flawless myth your isolated interior life has built around them. The shadow does not ever politely ask for permission to grow. It simply consumes. And the longer this agonizing desire goes completely unnamed, the more terrifying authority it accumulates in your psyche. It begins to unconsciously organize things: your daily mood, your fragile attention, the specific way a painfully ordinary Tuesday suddenly feels entirely different from all others, simply because they were briefly in it. You do not actively choose this. You violently discover it already in progress, much like Ike arriving late to a psychological thriller and realizing you somehow already know every single character. That is the haunting shadow self of desire. It is not loud or dramatic, it is just persistently, quietly, and permanently there. When a massive love has absolutely nowhere to go outward, it violently builds inward. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a terrifyingly accurate description of what actually physically happens inside a human being. The massive energy that would ordinarily rush toward another human being through physical touch, through loud confession, through the slow, beautiful accumulation of a shared daily life absolutely has to go somewhere. And so it desperately turns around, folds brutally back into itself, and begins rapidly constructing something completely interior, a totally private world, a locked, secret room deep inside the self that absolutely no one else is ever invited into. Over time, this hidden inner container becomes frighteningly, extraordinarily detailed. It is meticulously furnished with raw, real memories, a highly specific laugh, the exact way they tilted their head once during a fleeting conversation, the precise, agonizing warmth of an ordinary moment that probably meant absolutely nothing to the other person, but has been obsessively, quietly returned to hundreds of times since. These are not cheap fantasies in the typical escapist sense. They are meticulously curated, desperately and carefully held. The person does not completely lose themselves in pure delusion. They simply construct a sanctuary, a place they can go silently, where the heavy love is finally allowed to exist completely without consequence or demand. What is truly, terrifyingly striking about this mental container is how agonizingly disciplined it forces a person to become. Because they absolutely cannot act, they become supernaturally, extraordinarily attentive. They begin to notice everything, the microscopic shifts in the other person's daily mood, the heavy weight of the things left totally unsaid, the intricate, hidden texture of seemingly ordinary interactions. They silently become, in a very real sense, a deeply devoted student of someone who has absolutely no idea they are being rigorously studied, not in a creepy or predatory way, but in the profound way that deep love unconditionally sharpens human perception. You simply see with terrifying clarity what you care about most deeply. There is a highly specific, agonizing kind of human pain that our society has absolutely no ceremony for. When a loud, visible relationship officially ends, there are established structures immediately available, public sympathy, dedicated space to properly grieve, the widely acknowledged, validated weight of the loss. People inherently understand a breakup. They completely allow the grieving person the space for their total emotional disruption. But when the relationship fundamentally never even began, when the love was never spoken aloud, and the devastating loss is therefore completely invisible to the naked eye, absolutely none of those support structures activate. The cold world does not pause for you. No one stops to ask how you are doing. Because there is absolutely nothing physical to point to, nothing tangible to explain. And so there is absolutely nothing you are permitted to mourn, at least not publicly. This exact dynamic is what makes this particular psychological wound so incredibly, dangerously isolating. It leaves absolutely no external physical mark. There is no defined event, no dramatic ending, no climatic moment that anyone else witnessed. The person simply continues waking up, flawlessly functioning, maintaining every single surface relationship exactly as it always was, while they are quietly, internally bleeding to death in a dark place that no one even thinks to look. They absolutely cannot say, "I am grieving," because to verbally admit they are grieving inherently implies that something was tangibly lost, and to admit the massive loss would painfully require fully confessing the terrifying, massive secret they were silently carrying all along. So the agonizing pain completely folds into deafening silence, and the silence folds seamlessly into daily routine. And eventually, tragically, even the person themselves begins to violently question whether what they actually feel is real or proportionate or worthy of the crushing, suffocating weight it carries deep inside their chest. That vicious, endless self-questioning becomes its own horrific secondary wound. The primary wound is the massive love that absolutely cannot be expressed. The second is the slow, grinding, agonizing doubt about whether you are even fundamentally allowed to hurt this much over an event that technically, physically never happened. And yet, something deep inside your soul is genuinely, profoundly in mourning for a beautiful life that will remain forever unlived. There is an incredible, exhausting performance that happens every single day inside the mind of the person who loves silently. And it is, without question, one of the most psychologically draining things a human being can consciously sustain. On the outside, the picture reads as flawlessly normal. The thick mask is maintained with terrifying surgical precision. You give the easy, casual smile. You keep the totally appropriate physical distance. And you carefully, constantly calibrate your warmth so that it feels exactly genuine enough, but never quite enough to accidentally reveal the blinding inferno that lives directly beneath it. They have actively learned, through pure, desperate necessity rather than actual choice, to seamlessly operate on two entirely separate psychological levels simultaneously: the casual surface and the agonizing interior, the perfectly shown and the deeply felt. This mask fits their face so flawlessly well that sometimes even their closest, oldest friends have absolutely no idea it is there. What makes this duality so incredibly psychologically costly is the massive, sustained energy it absolutely requires. Genuine authenticity is deeply restful. You do not have to actively manage the truth, but meticulously performing casual composure in the direct physical presence of someone you love with your entire interior life demands constant, agonizing internal labor. Every single casual interaction becomes a desperate act of containment. Every completely ordinary exchange requires rigorous psychological monitoring. You are always silently treading water beneath the casual conversation, doing invisible, exhausting work. And yet, there is something profoundly beautiful here, absolutely worth naming. The simple fact that they fiercely maintain the persona is, in and of itself, a massive act of unselfish love. They are actively protecting you from the heavy burden of their own feelings. They are constantly, deliberately choosing your comfort over their own emotional relief. The mask is absolutely not a sign of cowardice. It is a form of absolute devotion so pure and so complete that it willingly, violently erases its own needs simply to keep you totally unburdened, entirely present, and completely free. There is a highly specific defining moment, the precise moment when the person deeply analyzes what they feel, brutally assesses what is actually possible, looks at the massive cost the truth of their love would demand from the other person if spoken aloud, and actively, deliberately chooses silence. The feeling is so completely genuine that it absolutely refuses to become a heavy obligation. It deeply cares far too much to ever demand anything selfish in return. This is the central, agonizing paradox at the core of this kind of love. The very terrifying depth of the feeling is the exact thing that forever prevents it from being declared. Their existing, perfectly balanced happiness becomes something fundamentally sacred, something that absolutely must not be disturbed, even at an agonizingly high personal cost. And so, the immense love naturally turns protectively inward, wrapping its arms tightly around its own silence, much like a hand desperately closing carefully over an open flame to prevent it from burning the entire house down. There is a massive, fundamental difference between violently burying something and truly learning to live with it. Brutal suppression is the desperate attempt to push the heavy feeling below awareness entirely. It is the precise psychological equivalent of pressing a fragile lid down on a boiling element that has absolutely no intention of ever staying contained. And just like all forms of brutal suppression, it absolutely does not work. What is violently refused entry through the front door always finds another, darker way in. It aggressively surfaces as irrational irritability, as sudden, inexplicable, crushing sadness, or as a destructive pattern of vicious self-sabotage in other surface relationships. True emotional integration, however, begins with absolute acknowledgement. The quiet, brutally honest, internal act of looking at the darkness and saying, "This is completely real. This is undeniably mine, and I absolutely do not need to be ashamed of it." This single, profound act completely changes the entire psychological nature of what the love does to a person. It permanently stops being a terrifying pressure that constantly builds toward an eventual violent rupture, and begins instead to be a heavy presence that can be metabolized, deeply understood, and beautifully, gradually transformed. What this massive love ultimately transforms into when it is integrated rather than violently suppressed is breathtakingly remarkable. It becomes the deep source of highly unusual, profound empathy, violently deepening character in profound ways that totally comfortable, shallow, uncomplicated emotional lives rarely ever do. When the loud, grand, cinematic gestures are totally unavailable, something incredibly unexpected happens to the soul. The incredibly small things suddenly become absolutely everything. The deeply ordinary moments that most people effortlessly rush through without even noticing suddenly become the entire vibrant landscape of what is genuinely possible. And so, they are fiercely attended to with a quality of hyper-focused presence that is almost terrifyingly devotional. A shared, passing laugh that deliberately lasts exactly 3 seconds longer than it strictly needed to. The highly specific, haunting way the light fell across the room during one otherwise completely unremarkable afternoon together. The profound, heavy texture of a silence that was utterly comfortable between two people who deeply understand each other without ever needing to violently perform understanding, because the future is permanently closed off and the full, loud expression of feeling is totally unavailable. All the massive energy violently collapses completely into right now, into this exact passing conversation, into this painfully ordinary Tuesday, into the simple, staggering, breathless fact of mere physical proximity, to quietly love through the deeply ordinary, absolutely without ever demanding it, violently become extraordinary, is not tragic resignation. It is, without question, one of the most violently beautiful, incredibly refined psychological capacities a human soul can quietly arrive at. If this breakdown finally put words to the heavy, silent reality you or someone you know has been carrying in the dark, hit the subscribe button right now. We dive deep into the profound, hidden psychology of human connection every single week. And you absolutely will not want to miss the intense psychological tools we are unlocking next. Leave a comment below if you have ever loved someone completely in the shadows. Your story is entirely safe here. Protect your peace, trust your undeniable reality, and stay brutally authentic.